Are we really alone out there in the universe? Well, according to these Redditors, we're certainly not. Here's 7 real-life UFO encounter stories from Reddit users. First time I ever tried to write this down. First time telling anyone outside the family. I'm leaving out time and location and some other details, because I'm still scared of what might happen with its publicity, I guess. Summer before 8th grade, me and my 2 friends snuck out at midnight to go walk around the neighborhood, to go see these girls on the next block who were having a sleepover. We turn a corner in our neighborhood and there's this huge, black, blimp-shaped thing in the sky, like the pictures of the Hindenburg, but bigger than that and close, if not closer. Completely silent, and it's the size of at least 4 to 5 football fields across. No exaggeration. I knew it even though I was young. We stare at it entranced, asking each other over and over again if we see it, which we all agree that we do. So we're just standing there, frozen, all in one place. It's like black, polished gunmetal. No lights, no sound, no anything. It's just hovering there. And I don't know what happened, but time clearly jumps. Next thing I remember, the craft or whatever it is gone, and there's a tiny glowing white barbell thing in the sky, seemingly slowly falling to earth with wisps of smoke coming off of it. Then 2 brand new black trucks with silver gearboxes on the back, like F-150s or S-10s, but nicer, came speeding down the street, going about 70 in a residential 25 miles per hour neighborhood. Then after that, I remember walking home to one of my friends' houses and going to bed. At that point, it was about 5 or 6 a.m. and the sun was coming up. We all made a promise to tell my dad in the morning because he worked for the city, but we never did. I don't know what happened later in life to one of my friends who was there, but the other was my best friend, and we sort of made an unspoken pact never to talk about it. Don't know how or why we did that. We all grew up, and I sort of lost touch with him too. We did reconnect over Facebook and such over the years, but it was like there was something between us neither of us wanted to touch or talk about. Looking back on it now, there's no way we could have been the only ones to see it. It wasn't that late at night, and it was over a heavily populated suburb of a major city. The idea of this has always scared me more than any sort of possible abduction scenario. That there are others, and that we're all voluntarily suffering a sort of collective amnesia, except in how we're not. I've thought about hypnosis, but that scares me too much. Plus, I'm not sure if I trust the result. I was just a kid then, and I'm not sure if I would trust the hypnotist. What I do know, again, is that there's no way it was just the 3 of us who saw it. We're talking about a huge thing hovering in the sky directly above hundreds of houses just after midnight on a summer weekend night. But nothing on the news, nothing in the paper, nothing on TV, no words spoken about it again ever by anyone. This is a true story. I'm a little older than the average around here, I think, but I know creepypasta and stuff like that is. But this happened. And there's no way I'm the only one who remembers. No way. Thanks for letting me get that off my chest. Whew. My mom tells a story of her and her friend. Let's call her friend Lisa. When my mom and Lisa were teenagers, they're up on the roof of Lisa's house, and they see a bright light in the sky. Next thing they know, the light is gone. Thing is, they think they've been on the roof for like 15 minutes, but something like 3 hours have passed. Mom doesn't remember anything about what happened during that time, and Lisa simply refuses to talk about it. She would answer my mom with things like, "I don't know," and just drop it for a long time. So a couple months later, Mom moves away and loses contact with Lisa for about 10 years. She finally meets up with her again and immediately notices that something is odd about Lisa. Lisa appeared very distant to her, with a very dreamy demeanor. Like she was really happy and at peace, for no good reason. After they talk for a bit, Lisa brings up the incident on the roof. Mom says she still doesn't really remember anything about it. But Lisa remembers. She remembers everything. She said that at first, it was all in bits and pieces, and she couldn't remember any of it clearly. She was confused and scared and wanted to avoid discussing it. Then, as time passed, she began to remember more of it. She remembers it all clearly, and she remembers the other 3 times she was abducted after that clearly as well. At first, they paralyzed her somehow and did all sorts of invasive experiments on her. But by the most recent time, they stopped probing her and began to talk with her. They didn't speak English or any other human language, but she could understand everything they said, even though she can't speak their language herself. Apparently, they told her all sorts of things, stuff about space, Earth itself, and most shockingly, predicted years beforehand that she would get pregnant in a specific year and that it would also be a stillborn, and that she would never be able to have children again. They also told her that it wasn't their fault, and they even made an attempt to save her from this fate, but they were unsuccessful. They also told her that they had abducted my mother another time after that first incident. Mom says she has no recollection of any other potential abductions, but she does have reoccurring nightmares of being abducted. But she's almost sure that they're just that, nightmares. Anyway, Lisa tells my mom every time she speaks with them, she comes to understand the truth more and more. When Mom inquires what the truth is, Lisa just says that, "You will know eventually." And she says that once she learned the truth, then everything became wonderful. Mom has seen her a few more times over the years. We still live in another state from her. And she apparently has a pretty normal life and doesn't, obsess over alien stuff, like some supposed alien abductees do. She only ever brings it up in passing, not like it's a central part of her daily life. I can't say for sure what happened to me that night, but here's what I know. I was driving home for the weekend from school at Indiana University. It takes me about 2 hours to get home, and I left Bloomington at around 10 p.m. At exactly 10:53, I'm on a rural stretch of the 2-lane highway I take home, and I noticed what appeared to be flashing lights behind me. I thought, great, I'm getting pulled over. So I turned onto the next country road about a quarter mile where I noticed the lights. As the car came to a stop and I started to open my glove box to get out my registration and proof of insurance, the lights suddenly disappear, and no car drove past. Now, here's where the story takes a turn for the weird. And I'm sure you guys will think I'm just making it all up because it really does seem like something straight out of a typical UFO movie or story. The electronics in my car start to go haywire. The radio was randomly changing stations while the volume kept going up and down while the dome lights and headlights start to flicker and turn off and back on. This was at 10:56 p.m. I start thinking to myself that my battery must be failing, or else I have a short somewhere in the electric system of my car. So I lean down to pop the hood so I can take a look at the battery, and that's the last thing I remember doing. The next thing I know, I open my eyes and see nothing but a night sky full of bright stars. It was a cold night, and it seemed like I had never seen stars that bright in my life. I sat up and looked around, and I saw absolutely nothing. Nothing at all. I was in the middle of a field, surrounded by corn stalks left over from the recent harvest. As I started to come to my senses, I started to freak out. Where am I? Why am I asleep in the middle of a field? Where's my car? I got up and started walking towards the distant headlights I could see from a road about 1.5 miles away. When I got to the nearest intersection, I looked at the signs which read 350 North and 50 West. I was 1/2 mile away from my car, which was right off the main road. I started walking towards the headlights I could see on the main road. I can't say how long it took me to walk the 1/2 mile, but it couldn't have been more than 10 or 15 minutes. When I arrived at my car, all the lights were out. My battery had died, which struck me odd because I couldn't have been gone for that long. I looked at my phone, which was sitting on my passenger seat, and the time was 2:17 a.m. Over 3 hours had passed since I turned off onto the side road for the flashing lights behind me. I remember sitting in my car completely dumbfounded, wondering what had just happened to me. After about half an hour of just sitting there, I remembered that my battery was dead, so I got on the phone and I called AAA to come out and give me a jump, which took about an hour for them to get to me since I was a good distance away from the nearest town, during which time I just sat in silence, running through the possible scenarios in my head concerning that of which happened. To this day, I couldn't tell you what really happened to me that night. All I know is I can't think of any plausible explanation as to why I woke up over half a mile away from my car in the middle of a cornfield more than 3 hours after I had stopped. I've only shared this story with one other person, my uncle, and I'm sure people would either look at me like I'm crazy or just call BS on the whole story, and I can't blame them. If somebody came to me with a story like that so closely mirrors the stereotypical encounter story, I probably wouldn't believe them either. I was on a wildfire just south of Dugway Proving Grounds in Utah. We were in fire rigs diving into the incident area, 4 trucks and a close convoy, when we heard helicopters. 8 black military choppers escorted us in formation for like 10 miles. We assumed that they were just doing drills and using us for fake target practice or something. A little while later, we were parked and about to start hiking to the fire line when suddenly a thin column of smoke shoots probably about 200 feet into the sky. It was a good mile away, but the concussion was pretty significant when it hit us and the noise was still ridiculously loud. I thought it was probably no big deal. We knew we were near a strike zone. A good 5 minutes later, an aircraft like nothing I've ever seen flew by us at maybe 500 feet. It was flat, black, and sort of rectangular, but with fins and wells on the underside. It was moving pretty slow and was dead silent, so I have to assume it was some sort of stealth glider. Sounds ridiculous, but it immediately reminded me of a huge flying Batmobile, Tim Burton era. After that, some military personnel got on the radio frequency and instructed us to leave the area immediately. When our crew chief asked who it was and why they signed off, the incident commander, the guy in charge of managing the entire situation, came on the radios and said that they were evacuating the area. They sent us to a completely different fire about 100 miles to the south and never told us why, except that it was a higher priority, which was crap. It was already out by the time we got there, and we just assisted the crews in the mop-up operation. The thing that confuses me about this is that if the army didn't want us to see it or if it was dangerous, why didn't they just keep us clear of the area in the first place? Either it was a communications breakdown, or they just had a bad situation going down and they had to get us out of there without warning. I was traveling back home with my mom from my aunt's house on a warm, sunny afternoon. While I was sitting in the passenger seat, an object just appeared in the sky a little to our left. We both saw it immediately. The size of it was shocking more than anything. It had the classic saucer shape and was shining brightly because the sun was reflecting off of it. We continued driving down the road for a few seconds, just admiring this craft, when all of a sudden we saw something I still don't believe to this day. It just vanishes, disintegrates, disappears, whatever you want to call it. I looked back at my mom and I could tell by her expression that she had seen the same thing. Since the sighting, I have always been interested in UFOs and the possibility of life in our universe. This object in the sky was definitely not a helicopter, airplane, or a flock of geese. My mom and I still talk about the sighting we had and can't come up with a reasonable explanation as to what we saw that day. This is my UFO story, and it's not a hoax or fabrication. Everyone always laughs at me when I tell this story, but that's fine. I know what I saw. Ed Ray, West Virginia. One night a few years back, my friend who was driving and I are taking his girlfriend home when he decided to take the long way home. After we're driving along this fairly deserted back road, I began to zone out and I stared at this blinking red light off in the distance and casually think to myself, I wonder when they built a cell phone tower all the way out here, when suddenly it blinks and is dramatically closer than it just was a moment earlier. At this point, my friend points to it and stops in the road. It blinks once more and is directly in front and over the top of us. The red light is so bright it floods the car in a deep scarlet hue. I lean forward so that I can see directly into the light. In that brief moment, I feel a flood of negative emotions. The closest description I can offer to that is being naked under a giant microscope and having every pore examined thoroughly. I then look away from the light to my friend and ask him to drive. He barely responds, apparently in a similar state. Then he snaps out of it and he starts driving. As we get a little ways down the road, I notice the red light isn't fading and the interior of the car is still clearly lit by it. I look out the window and to my horror the light is following us, and does so for approximately 1 to 2 miles. The light unexpectedly veers off to the left and comes down to ground level in a patch of trees adjacent to the road. My friend stops the car again and continues to stare at it, and abruptly declares that he's going to get out and looks like he's in some sort of trance. He opens the door and I grab his arm, and I tell him if he does, I will get in the driver's seat and I'll leave him, and that we have to leave this instant. He looks at me and he seems to come to, and he punches the gas so hard that the tire loses traction and spins. The light remains stationary as we rode away, but I've never looked at the night sky the same again. 1997, Colorado Springs. I was 8 years old, playing in the sand volleyball court at the park down the street from my house. I was engrossed in my activity, burying my collection of Happy Meal toys in the sand, and then digging them back out. Repeat. I was looking down, but decided suddenly that I need to look up because the world around me had lost all sound. There was no longer any ambient noise. No traffic noise from the busy streets just a block over. No more dogs barking, no more birds chirping. I looked at the street that bordered the park, and that's when I saw it. It looked like a stealth bomber turned sideways, nose leading, one wing down towards the road, the other pointed up at the sky, completely shiny black in color, as tall as a house, and shaped like an arrowhead. It was cruising the street at 3 miles per hour, just gliding over the road. I watched it for maybe 20 seconds. As soon as it had passed behind me, it was out of my sight. I got my hearing back full force. I ran home with soaked pants and never spoke a word of it to anybody. Edit. Here's a quick sketch I made in all of my talented glory. I only lived in Colorado Springs in 1997. I lived on Don Juan Court, so I guess the park I was playing in was called Franklin Park. Immediately after, I moved back to Phoenix just in time for the Phoenix Lights. All of these stories were taken from a thread on Reddit. If you'd like to read these or other stories, the link is in the description below. That's all the time I have for today, my friends. I hope you're having a wonderful day or evening. I'm Imori. Now, listen to the spacey tunes.